Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me? Some people say they can't hear me. That's interesting. I show that I've got audio. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah. Don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. That certainly gets the number of uh, messages in the chat up when you can't hear me. What I was saying is that I'm coming to you from Georgetown, Guyana, and I'm in a old Dutch colonial hotel. It's about 120, 130 years old. It's a beautiful place, very well kept. And I love this architecture. It's really nice. Uh, I have to say, though, I've been sort of surprised by Guyana. I had read so much about the development that's taking place here because of the oil wealth that has been found recently offshore that I kind of expected it to look like Dubai. And really, it looks more like Haiti than Dubai. So while the oil wealth is trickling into the population somewhat, it hasn't really taken effect yet. The only thing that I've really noticed that is bright and shiny and new is the government has put up speed cameras on every street in Georgetown, literally like every 100 feet apart. I mean, I'm getting used to seeing speed cameras around the world wherever I go. That's becoming more and more popular in all kinds of places. But I'm kind of shocked to see so many. I mean, normally they put them a mile or two apart, maybe, but every 100 feet. I mean, that is literally a speed camera. I mean, the amount of money they must have spent on turning this country into a full-blown nanny state is pretty spectacular. However, the people here don't seem to take much notice of them, and it doesn't look like it's changed their driving habits a whole lot either. So uh, suffice it to say that Guyana is still a developing country. It's one of the least populated countries in terms of population density when you take the country as a whole. The vast majority of the 800,000 or so people that live in Guyana live along the corridor that goes along the coast. Let's see if I can pull up a map here for that. Let's see if I can pull the map up for you. Let's see here. There it is. Chrome, Google Maps. There we go. Okay. So we take a look at this map and you can see here, well, let's get away from that. You look at Guyana right next to Venezuela. And there are 3 Guyanas now. There used to be 4. The 3 Guyanas are French Guyana over here, Suriname, which used to be called Dutch Guyana, and now they just call it Guyana, but it used to be called British Guyana. And this part over here, which is called the Essequibo region, was at one time called Spanish Guyana. But Guyana declared its independence from Great Britain in 1966. And this whole region became Guyana. Now, there was a dispute over this part of Guyana, which is about 2/3 of the country. It's about the size of Florida right here. There was a dispute over that back about the time that they started building this hotel that I'm in over 100 years ago. And they took it to court. International court decided, nope, that belongs to British Guyana and not to Venezuela. And that was supposed to have settled it. But now Venezuela is wanting to claim this for itself again. And I want to show you, let me show you what I found yesterday when I traveled out to the Essequibo region. Watch this. The Essequibo River is like 20 miles across here at the mouth. It stretches 600 miles inland and forms part of the border between the area of Guyana that Venezuela claims and the rest of the country. Over on that side, Venezuela says that's their territory. But the United States has something to say about that. Well, if you're going to come visit the rainforest, don't be surprised if you get rained on. I came to Guyana because it's one of the fastest growing economies in the whole world. It's under threat from Venezuela, and it may just be the key to unlocking the oil revenues for the people who have, up until this point, lived in a very poor country. So there's a lot of interesting things happening here, and all of it sort of started right here. This is called Fort Zeelandia, and it's on the Essequibo River, which forms the boundary of the Essequibo region, which is the region that Venezuela is claiming as theirs, not so much because they care about any of this history or the jungle or anything like that, which is about all that's out here. The only thing they really care about is the oil revenues that are offshore. And they didn't make too much fuss about taking over Essequibo up until the point when they found 11 billion barrels of oil just offshore. For being one of the least inhabited places on Earth, there's actually a lot of economic activity that goes on up and down the Essequibo River here. They have bauxite mines, gold mines, all sorts of kind of extraction, things like that happen further upstream. Of course, just offshore, they've got the newfound oil fields that are being developed. And all that means that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity that is coming this way and hopefully will affect these people very soon. So this country kind of has an ancillary role in the ongoing conflict between the United States and Venezuela, but there's a lot more to that conflict that we're going to talk about today, and that has to do with the influence from Iran, Hezbollah in the Western Hemisphere, right on our doorstep, and Iran basically trying to use Venezuela as a proxy force against the United States. But a lot of that actually has quite a bit to do with what's going on here in Guyana, which is why I wanted to come here and see it for myself. And, I got a chance yesterday to kind of walk around downtown Georgetown. And again, I expected this country to look more like Dubai. I thought we'd see a lot of bright, shiny new hotels and, modern buildings and things like that. Because the economy of Guyana is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, I expected it to be a lot wealthier than what I found. And what I found was instructive to me, because I realized that the place where Guyana started from was so poor, was so low, that even after 5 years of stratospheric growth, they're still developing. Let's put it that way. And they may get to the point at some point in the near future where it does start to look like Dubai here, but we're not there yet. And so I walked through the marketplace, and I want to show you a little bit about that while I talk about our sponsor. So I got to turn that audio down. Take a good look around. You got fish sitting out in the sun. You got flies buzzing all over the place, stuff that would definitely make your stomach turn. I couldn't obviously show you what it smelled like, but I can tell you it was not good. And here's the kicker, though. you don't have to live in a third world country to worry about parasites. They might already be living inside your body, just messing with your brain and your gut, and they can even cause tumors while you're going about your day thinking that you're fine. So here's the fun part. Most doctors in the United States aren't even trained to look for this stuff. Parasites are not just a third world country problem. The CDC says that millions of Americans are dealing with them right now, usually without a clue, until it turns into seizures or heart failure or whatever. That's why the wellness company put together their ivermectin plus mebendazole parasite cleanse. It's not some sketchy street cure. It's a doctor prescribed, USA compounded treatment designed to flush out the critters you might be living in your gut. It won't hurt to do one cycle. It just takes 21 days, but they give you a 90-day supply. The whole thing's done online. You fill it out, a form on their website. A doctor checks it, and the package shows up at your door a week later. So no flies, no fish guts, and no guessing games. So be smart. Do a real parasite cleanse before they do you. Uh, Head over to twc.health/hotzone. You can use code HOTZONE to save $60 plus get free shipping. And you can see that link in the chat or in the description of this video. So again, go to twc.health/hotzone and use code HOTZONE to save $60 and get free shipping. Okay, so we're going to talk about what the United States is doing. We already did a video about the military buildup that's happening off the coast of Venezuela. Why is the United States doing that? Well, Secretary of State Pete Hegseth, I'm sorry, Secretary of State, he's the Secretary of War now, Pete Hegseth, he used to be the Secretary of Defense, made a surprise visit to some of the U.S. troops that are stationed on Puerto Rico, right, kind of preparing for whatever might happen. And he explained to them what they're doing there and why they are changing the name of the Department of Defense. And I thought it'd be worth listening to as we watch footage of him arriving on the USS Iwo Jima to talk to U.S. troops there. Take a listen.
Now, the reason I like the name War Department so much is not because I love war. I don't, and neither do you. It's because I seek and love peace. And those who love and long for peace must prepare for war. We are in the strength department of peace through strength. Other folks will make sure that the diplomatic relations land right where they should, and our commander-in-chief is focused on that. He is a peace president, but he's asked me, he's asked General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who's with us here today as well, to ensure that we have the most ready, most capable military.
So he makes it clear that the reason that they are changing the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War, and the reason that they're building up forces in Puerto Rico and off the coast of Venezuela is because they are now taking very seriously the concept of peace through strength. And you might think that this doesn't have anything to do with the 12-day war that we saw over in Iran between Israel, the United States, and Iran a few months ago. But it actually does, because if we want to counter Iran's influence and Iran's ability to hurt the United States, we have to focus on what's happening right here in our hemisphere, because Iran has been trying to work with Venezuela to make Venezuela another proxy to fight against the West. And I'm going to explain some ways that they are doing that. First of all, you know that Iran supports Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a proxy force. But aside from the money that Iran gives to Hezbollah, aside from the weapons that Iran gives to Hezbollah, Hezbollah makes millions of dollars every year from illicit activities, many of which are tied to the Western Hemisphere. A lot of people don't know that there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Lebanese people who live in Venezuela. There's a huge Lebanese diaspora in Venezuela. As a matter of fact, the former vice president of Venezuela was himself or is himself a descendant of Lebanese descent. And this guy is very heavily involved in the drug trade as well. So Hezbollah was profiting off of the drug trade coming out of Venezuela and using that to fund terror operations in the Middle East. They're also using Venezuela to get operatives into the United States, both Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, maybe even Russia, and possibly even China, because Venezuela was what they call sheep dipping those operatives. So, for example, Russia sends operatives over, or Iran sends operatives over to Venezuela. Venezuela issues them passports as if they are Venezuelan citizens. And then those guys would make their way up into the United States during the Biden administration, cross illegally into the US. And if they get caught, that shows they're Venezuelan. They don't show up on any, any database or anything the United States has. And so there's not really any way for us to know that they're not Venezuelan. And so in that way, Iran, Russia, China, Cuba, and Venezuela are able to send agents into the United States. Now, some of those might be sleeper cells that are just waiting to be activated to, commit some kind of act of terror. Some of them might be engaged in asymmetric warfare already, in working to create dissension and division in the United States, like we've seen Russia do very effectively online and on U.S. college campuses, to turn the hearts of American youth away from their country of birth and make them hate their own country. This is a concerted, intentional effort. This is not something that is just being done ad hoc. And we've talked about it a lot, but it bears repeating. If the United States is going to take this seriously, the threat, the asymmetric threat from Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, North Korea, etc., they have to take Venezuela seriously as a jumping off place for those threats right on our doorstep. And we're finally doing that. Now, this is something we've known about for a long time. As a matter of fact, during the first Trump administration, the AG Bill Barr was giving briefings on this topic and talking about the threat from Venezuela. As a matter of fact, I went and found an old video of that. Take a listen to what Barr said in 2019 about the threat from Venezuela.
There's an area right on the border in Colombia, Norte de Santander, which is one of the primary cocaine producing areas remaining in Colombia. The FARC gets this cocaine over into Venezuela and then is given safe haven by the regime to fly this cocaine from an area called Zulia near Lake Maracaibo up into Central America. We estimate that somewhere between 200 and 250 metric tons of cocaine are shipped out of Venezuela by these routes. Maduro and his other defendants have betrayed the Venezuelan people and corrupted Venezuela's institutions. While the Venezuelan people suffer, this cabal lines their pockets with drug money and the proceeds of their corruption. And this has to.
Okay, so you can see there that this is a threat that's been going on for some time, and it was not getting addressed during the Biden administration in any significant way. But now the Pentagon, the Department of War, are starting to take it seriously. And that, man, kudos to the Trump administration for getting serious about this threat. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, there were U.S. warplanes flying over Guyana, flying right overhead here in Georgetown. They're just presence patrols, combat air patrols flown over this region. as a warning to Venezuela, as a message to Venezuela, keep your hands off of this country. And Venezuela wants very badly to take over that Essequibo region because they want to claim the offshore oil drilling rights. But the United States is not going to stand for that. When the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, came here in March, he sat down with the president, Irfan Ali, and they inked a deal to cooperate more on defense between the United States and Guyana because the United States has a vested interest in not allowing Venezuela to aggress against its neighbor. Now, it'd be pretty hard for Venezuela to do that anyway. I've talked about this before because there aren't any roads between Venezuela and Guyana. None. I mean, not one. There's not one road crossing between the two countries, and they have a 1,000-mile border, which is pretty amazing. But that's because you're talking about some of the most dense Amazon jungle in existence. And so it wouldn't be possible to attack with tanks or anything like that. So they're not going to drive troops across the border into Guyana and take this area. The whole of the Essequibo region, again, it's an area about the size of Florida, only has like 130,000 people living in it. And these people are spread out on tiny little Indian villages that are only reachable by boat, some cases by air. That town I went to in Parika yesterday, right on the border of the Essequibo River, it's really it's the last civilization that you find of any consequence when you drive west from the capital here in Georgetown. It's about an hour and a half drive out there. Uh, Georgetown is, and Guyana, very friendly people. They speak English. It's their official language here, although I have to say, while it sounds suspiciously like English to me, I have a hard time understanding the accent. It's pretty thick, kind of not it was like British Jamaican or something. It's kind of a really thick accent. It's difficult for me to understand. Uh, this is more of a kind of Caribbean vibe here than it is a South American vibe or Latin vibe. There's not a lot of that. One thing that I did notice is a preponderance of refugees, or I guess you'd call them migrants, who are here from places like Venezuela and Cuba. Uh, Surprisingly, the Venezuelans that came here, we're talking, about 3% of the population here now are Venezuelan migrants, and they came here fleeing their own country. It's a little more challenging for them to come here than it is for them to go to the other direction to Colombia, because at least in Colombia they can speak the language. Colombia is friendlier to the migrants. They've taken in more than 2 million Venezuelan migrants, and they give them temporary protected status. They give them a 10-year work visa so they can work there. It's much harder for Venezuelan migrants here in Guyana, and they represent a much bigger burden, let's say, on the social welfare system and the culture here. Uh, and I'd say they clash more with the culture here as well. If you're in uh, Colombia, you'd have to have a pretty trained eye to tell the difference between a Venezuelan and a Colombian just walking on the street. Excuse me. Here in Guyana, it's pretty easy to tell because the majority of the native Guyanese are more of African descent or Indian descent. So they're Amerindian or Afro-Indian, African, I don't know, whatever. Um, and so when you see maybe lighter skinned, kind of Latino looking people, obviously, if you hear them speaking Spanish, then you can guess that they're either from Cuba or Venezuela. Also, I've noticed that Venezuelans tend to have a tremendous amount of body art, ink, you know, on their bodies. It doesn't look real classy to me, I have to say. And of course, it's not that you don't see uh, people here in Guyana that have ink, but I think it's less um, prevalent, at least, somewhat. Uh, from what I can tell, Guyana is a predominantly Christian country. They're modest and polite for the most part. They do like their noise for sure. It's one thing that's very common in Latin America that I notice is that people think a little bit less about being considerate of others, and they lean a little more towards personal freedom. So if I want to put a 6 foot tall speaker on my front porch and crank the music up at 6 o'clock in the morning, uh, nobody's going to really say anything about it. Where in the United States, it might get you shot to do something like that. That would be considered to be very rude, very inconsiderate to be playing music at 3 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning uh, outside. But here, it's apparently not rude at all. As a matter of fact, they almost see it like a public service. Like, well, everybody likes music. So if I'm playing super loud music in my car at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm doing the world a favor, that kind of thing. And that's kind of hard for somebody like me to understand and get my head around. And I mean, it just is what it is. You have to, when you travel to places around the world, you have to sort of just accept that sometimes the rules are different and the cultures are different, and they don't really care whether I like it or not, but it certainly makes it a little harder to get any sleep. I moved from my previous hotel because they were playing music outside the hotel till 2 o'clock in the morning, like really, really loud, and I just couldn't get any sleep. So I just had to go find a quieter hotel. Also, while I was at that hotel, I was right next to the National Stadium, and it appeared that there was a cricket game or something going on because there were a lot of sports fans out. But then about 10 o'clock at night, they started this huge fireworks display, which is not uncommon for sporting, sporting events. But I mean, this was a serious fireworks display. It was like 4th of July in Washington, D.C. I mean, it was huge. I couldn't believe they did all of that for a common soccer game or cricket match or something like that. Come to find out, it was actually the inauguration of the president because he had just got reelected and his inauguration was Sunday night. And so that's what the big fireworks display was all about. So the president here, Irfan Ali, uh, ran on the platform of sharing the oil wealth that Guyana is generating with the people. So if you look at a place like the UAE, for example, an emirate, they have lots of oil wealth, but most of that oil wealth goes to the emirs, or maybe the king, like in Saudi Arabia. And those people are fabulously wealthy. And some of that trickles down to the populace in the form of free education or free medical care or something like that. But in the case of this particular country, what the president has promised to do is to invest the oil wealth in public works to dramatically increase the standard of living of the people here. And believe me, they can use it because up until not too long ago, the average income was really among the lowest in the Western Hemisphere. And so as I've talked to people, they've said that they're, I guess, receiving about $500 a year from the government as a share of the oil wealth, and they're hoping that that will dramatically increase as the amount of oil that they extract spikes and goes way up. They just passed 1 million barrels for the first time this year. But there's, as I said before, 11 billion barrels of oil uh, that have been found offshore. And actually, there might be a lot more than that. They said it could be up to 20 billion barrels of oil, which is more oil than like Norway. So you look at Norway's massive $1.3 trillion sovereign wealth fund and how that enables Norway to give free healthcare and education and stuff to its people. Well, that's what they're trying to do here in Guyana. So they just approved a sovereign wealth fund here, I think a couple years ago. But really, it's only been about 5 years since they actually started to extract the oil from the waters off the shore of Guyana. So it's taking a while for it to really make much of a difference. But it does definitely paint a target on Guyana's back. That target is makes Guyanese kind of nervous. There's signs and bumper stickers and stuff you see all over this country that say Essequibo is Guyana, making the point that it doesn't belong to Venezuela. They can't have it. And it's not, as I said in that video when I went out there yesterday, there's nothing out there for Venezuela in the actual land portion of Essequibo for them to care about. It's just all jungle. So, jungle and more jungle. So it really comes down to the only thing they really care about is the offshore oil. And the United States is going to stand up for Guyana and not allow Venezuela to take that. But let's turn over now to the real threat from Venezuela. So Venezuela does not present a military threat to the United States. I talked a little bit about the fact that there's rumors that they may be producing Shahed 136 drones in Venezuela, and that those drones could potentially reach the United States. But Venezuela wouldn't be stupid enough to try to bomb the United States, because we would wipe the floor with Venezuela in a matter of days. And many Venezuelans have told me that if the United States did decide to attack Venezuela, the Venezuelan military would roll over in about 15 minutes because the morale is very low. None of them really like Maduro, except for the guys that are getting money from him. So that's, you know, something serious there. Now, Iran moving its agents through Venezuela, using Venezuela as a jumping off place to threaten the United States, is a much bigger problem. As you know, if Iran was went to war with the United States and killed 100,000 Americans, or 30,000 Americans, or 3,000 Americans, or 300 Americans, we would be at full-blown war with Iran. Well, the drug trade, which is facilitated by Iran, and which Iran profits from, well, Hezbollah profits from, is responsible. The cocaine, just the cocaine part, is responsible for about 30 to 40,000 deaths every year in the United States. So kudos to President Trump and Secretary Hegseth for making this a priority. This is what the United States military should be doing, more than anything else, is protecting America from threats, foreign and domestic, and they don't have to be conventional military threats. And so I see a lot of confusion, or people that are taking issue with the fact that the United States is striking a boat full of smugglers or gang members that's leaving the coast of Venezuela. And the confusion, it comes from because people don't understand that we never said those boats were headed directly to the United States. Those go fast boats don't go to the United States from Venezuela directly. They don't have the range. What they do is they go to places like Trinidad, and then the drugs get put on bigger ships, and then make their way to the United States, or they go to the coast of Mexico. and they make their way overland to the United States, as Bill Barr pointed out. And back in 2019, he said there were 250 tons of cocaine being trafficked every year to the United States. That's huge. That's huge. And so this is an act of war for especially the government of Venezuela to be even just turning a blind eye to that, much less facilitating it, much less profiting from it. And we have evidence that the government of Venezuela is profiting from the drug trade into the United States. So that is an act of war that needs to be dealt with. And we need to treat it as such. So people are saying, well, they shouldn't have bombed a civilian boat. Well, listen, that wasn't a fishing boat, okay? Fishing boats don't have four 200 horsepower motors on the back. Those things, that's $80,000 worth of motor on that one boat. No fisherman is going to have that kind of setup. The only reason to have a boat with four outboard motors on it is so that you can get very, very quickly across, and avoid the patrols of the Coast Guard and that sort of thing, outrun them and get where you're going. And the only reason you would do that is because you're smuggling something, either drugs or people, or both. So not only that, but this particular boat was traveling in the middle of the night. Fishermen typically don't go out in the middle of the night looking for fish. So just common sense tells you that these smugglers were not civilians, that these were nefarious actors, and they had it coming. And hopefully we will see more of that. That the word is that the Pentagon is planning. What I mean by planning is not that they're preparing to. They are making plans in case they are given the command to strike targets on the land in Venezuela. Honestly, I would like to see that happen because it would be a great show of force that would show not just Venezuela, but the rest of the world that we are serious about tackling this asymmetric warfare nexus. And honestly, there's not much better way for us to remove a major component of Iran's threat to the United States by removing the threat of Venezuela. Now, if we were to take such action as would lead to the ouster of President Maduro, that doesn't necessarily mean we would have to bomb him or drop Delta Force on his head and take him out and arrest him like we did Manuel Noriega. Just putting pressure on Venezuela the way we are is already leading to rumors that his own people might take him out just to avoid further pressure on the Cartel de los Soles. So that cartel, of which Maduro is a member, may actually take Maduro out just to get the pressure off of them. And getting rid of Maduro and allowing the duly elected president of Venezuela to take power would be a massive step in fixing a lot of the problems we see all across Latin America, because that would mean that 8 million Venezuelans could probably go back home again. Many of them would love to, even from the United States. If there's one thing you can say about Venezuelans is that they are very patriotic. And that actually is amazing to see, because I've heard so many Venezuelans at different points in my reporting down here say to me, why doesn't President Trump send troops down here to take out Maduro? And my answer has always been, why should my son have to bleed for your country when you're not willing to bleed for your country? But now that the United States is actually kind of threatening to do something like that, a lot of the Venezuelans are turning around and saying, "Oh, this is an attack on our sovereignty." I mean, they're defending their own country now. Which I don't get it. Like, okay, you don't like Maduro? Wouldn't you want anything to happen that would result in Maduro being taken out. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But like I say, this is a great way for the United States to reduce the threat from Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, Russia, and China, because everything we do with Venezuela is going to redound to the rest of those adversaries in terms of deterrent force. Does that make sense? Okay. So a lot of people are asking me about the strike on Qatar. And I have to say that I just saw it right before we went live. And so I haven't really had a chance to read much about it. But um, let's see here. So we're told that, uh, wow, 15 fighter jets flew 1,800 kilometers to drop 12 precision guided bombs on Qatar and eliminate a bunch of Hamas leaderships that was taking refuge in Qatar, it looks like. So I'll just read you what information I have here. Israel attacked Hamas headquarters in Doha. The IDF spokesperson announced that the Air Force recently carried out a targeted strike on the leadership of the Hamas terrorist organization. According to the statement, the leadership members who were attacked led the terrorist organization's activities for years and are directly responsible for carrying out the October 7th massacre and managing the war against the state of Israel. The IDF statement comes after reports in Arab world media about an explosion in Doha and smoke rising from the site. Palestinian sources claim the attack targeted Hamas headquarters in the Qatar neighborhood in Doha. The neighborhood is considered one of the most prestigious in the Qatari capital. It's a neighborhood where most of Qatar's cultural institutions are located and is considered a site that attracts tourists. So that may actually have a pretty serious effect on Qatar's tourism trade. And Qatar is suspending its mediation between Hamas and Israel in terms of a hostage negotiation out of Gaza. Good. Um, the prime minister said today's operation against Hamas terror leaders was a completely independent Israeli operation. Israel initiated it, Israel executed it, and Israel takes full responsibility. And it looks like they've eliminated at least 5 major Hamas leaders who were in Qatar. That brings to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 countries or areas that Israel has attacked its enemies in since the beginning of the war: Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, and Qatar. And so we're going to have to do a different live about this, because I got to go make some phone calls and check with some sources about this, because that is definitely a big deal. I guess major deal. So uh, I I'm going to go answer questions real quick for the last few minutes, and then I will jump off because I have a bunch more to do today here before I leave Guyana tomorrow. Christina Mina says, how stable is the Guyanese government? Any corruption issues that will prevent the improving of income and life in the Guyanese people? There are some corruption issues. They are attempting to address those. How stable is the government? Pretty stable. The president, as far as I can tell, is pretty popular. He was just reelected, and he was reelected on the platform of, we're going to make everything better for the people in Guyana by using the newfound oil wealth and improving education, improving the roads, improving the healthcare, improving housing, all of those things for the people. Jerry CC says, what are the stats for opioids? Far greater. The opioid epidemic has actually declined a lot in the last couple of years, and it's mostly because of a great increase in the United States of the use of what do they call that? Anyway, it's if somebody makes an overdose and you have this stuff on hand, you can give them a shot with that, and you can keep them from dying from that overdose. Narcolam. I'm just spacing on the name of the antidote, and so by spreading that antidote around very liberally across hospitals and other centers like that, they've managed to dramatically reduce the incidence of opioid overdose deaths by those kinds of drugs. Jimmy Bob says, will Maduro run to Moscow? Well, he might if he has a chance. He might. He almost did when there was a coup attempt a few years ago. He almost got on the plane and went to Moscow. So we'll see whether or not that plays out if the United States decides to try to make a play to take out Maduro completely. He is surrounded by Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group. I've been told that there are some Cuban, maybe even Chinese or Iranian troops in Caracas that are surrounding the palace there because Nicolas Maduro does not trust his own military to protect him because they don't like him very much for the most part. So A. Robbins says, how does Venezuela play geopolitically with regards to Guyana? Well, they've just been saying mine to 2/3 of the country and kind of left it at that. They passed a law in Venezuela after they had a referendum in which very, very, very few people voted to call the Essequibo region part of Guyana officially and to change the maps of Venezuela to represent that Venezuela includes the Essequibo region, and that referendum was passed by, like they say, a 99% margin. Of course, any election in Venezuela is going to be suspect. All the third-party monitoring groups have said that election was bogus as the day is long. So now every map that you see in Venezuela of their country will include the Essequibo region, but that doesn't mean they own it. Steve Reitler says, speaking of Iran, did they cross the line by shipping chemical weapons to the Houthis? And is Iran also looking to create some kind of proxy in the Western Hemisphere? Well, that's what we've been talking about here, is that they see Venezuela as a proxy, and they certainly have been supporting Venezuela with military hardware, military technology. Russia has been as well. And, of course, that whole nexus of Russia, Cuba, Iran, China, all the communist countries of the world, they all work together on this. Interestingly enough, Brazil has been leaning more toward that nexus themselves, not being so friendly to the Western Hemisphere, but being more friendly to the Russia, China, Iran nexus as a part of BRICS. But Brazil is not real friendly toward Venezuela because they don't want a bunch of Venezuelan migrants coming into Brazil. They've actually sent troops up there to the border because they don't want Venezuelan troops trying to cut through Brazil to get to Guyana. That's the only way to get there by road. And so the Iranians certainly are trying to create a proxy in the Western Hemisphere. And that's what I'm getting at with this live, is that by confronting Venezuela, we are really confronting Iran. Lord Peanut says, would you agree that just like with Iran, now the last threat wasn't empty after the attack on Qatar? Yeah, absolutely. LC says, any other resources there? Yes, there's a lot of gold here in Guyana. There's a lot of bauxite, which is used in aluminum smelting. There's other minerals, copper and things like that. So there's a lot of mining and other extractive industries in Guyana. And so, yeah, quite a bit. And Guyana can be a very, very wealthy country if they manage those resources correctly. Bobby Sox says, is there still British influence in Guyana? In terms of the language and the culture, yes, but not in terms of direct influence by Great Britain. You don't see much of that. Question, why is Russia stepping up drone attacks in Ukraine? Because President Trump has kind of given them the green light to do so, and he hasn't done anything about their previous escalations in Ukraine. And so they're doing it because they can. And so if President Trump were to actually make good on any of his threats to sanction Russia, to, take harsher steps against Russia, they might be able to dial that back. But so far, President Trump has been all talk when it comes to confronting Russia. Mike Silva says, how are Americans viewed or treated while visiting Venezuela? I don't think it'd be a good idea for Americans to visit Venezuela right now. Kidnapping is about the only growth industry in Venezuela at the moment. And if you're an American, you'd be almost guaranteed to get kidnapped within minutes of arriving in the country. As I found out myself when I crossed into Venezuela on foot a couple of years ago, and within seconds was grabbed by three guys who tried to kidnap me and take me to Caracas, and had to fight my way out of there. That was exciting. Dylan Penn, hey, Chuck, what's your thoughts on Paul Warburg? I like Paul. I watch his stuff. It's all focused on Russia, and it's all very pro-Ukrainian. But I don't find a lot with Paul Warburg that I disagree with. So I do follow him. Hopkey says, what are the Venezuelan people's overall opinion of the Guyanese? As far as people in Venezuela, I really don't know. As far as Venezuelans in Guyana, they feel like they are second-class citizens. They feel like they're persecuted. They don't get the kinds of support that the everyday Guyanese people get. And I'm not saying they should. Just because you come illegally to my country doesn't mean that you should have the right to every welfare benefit that people in my country, that citizens of my country get. The Guyanese can't really handle a gigantic influx of migrants from Venezuela. And so they've taken steps to make it kind of uncomfortable for Venezuelans to live here, difficult for them to make a living. When you go to the poorest parts of Guyana, as far as in Georgetown, those are the places where you will find the most Venezuelans for sure. And so anyway, that's all there is to say about that. So pretty amazing stuff going on. I'm going to have to, again, probably go live again later. Narcan, there we go. Oh, I forgot. I couldn't remember what that was called. Narcan. Thank you for 25 people that let me know that it's called Narcan. Thank you. And again, because everybody is carrying it now, you're able to save a lot of people's lives. And we've dramatically reduced the number of people who die of, the overdoses from fentanyl. So good on America for doing that, but be better if we just reduce the amount of fentanyl coming into America, and that would help as well. So, John, thank you very much. And John says 450 South Koreans all in one factory. Yeah, I guess so. The ICE officers that raided that Hyundai plant, was a South Korean car manufacturer plant in the United States, arrested 450 people for being there illegally. A lot of them were here on a tourist visa and were working in this factory. They don't have the right to work. A lot of them were there on different things, just here illegally, had crossed the southern border illegally and were working there. So I trust ICE to do their homework and not be arresting people that shouldn't be arrested. And if they are arresting people who should be arrested, more power to them. Speaking of more power to them, you've heard me be somewhat critical of President Trump at times. And I wanted to end today by giving President Trump kudos for one of the best things that I have ever heard him do. So I, just to let you know that when President Trump does something I like, boy, I'll praise him to the skies. So I want you to listen to part of his speech at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. yesterday, and what he said about instituting prayer in schools. Take a listen.
The Bible is found in every classroom in the nation, yet in many schools today, students are instead indoctrinated with anti-religious propaganda, and some are even punished for their religious beliefs, and very, very strongly punished. It's ridiculous. I'm pleased to announce this morning that the Department of Education will soon issue new guidance protecting the right to prayer in our public schools, and it's total protection. Thank you, Hannah. Great job.
So kudos to President Trump for that. You know, one of the things that I like about living in Panama is that Panama is still a very, very Christian country. And when they rewrote the Constitution of Panama back in 1991, they looked at areas of the U.S. Constitution where there is friction, where you know maybe the founders of the United States could have been a little more clear on things like the separation of church and state, which doesn't exist in our Constitution, but is claimed by a lot of people. You know, what the Constitution says is that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion, meaning a state religion. It doesn't say anything about Congress will make no law respecting the exercise, the free exercise of religion, and that gets turned on its head. So when the Panamanians were redrafting their constitution, they wanted to be very, very clear about those whole religious freedom things. And so what they wrote into the Panamanian constitution is that all religions are welcome in Panama to be, you know, people doing worship however they want, so long as it does not offend the Christian faith, because more than 90% of people in Panama consider themselves Christian. Most of that is Catholic. And of course, there's a lot of people who are culturally Catholic or marginally Catholic in there. But suffice it to say that Panama considers itself a Christian country. And so they didn't want to open the floodgates to, you know, the Church of Satan or Santeria or any kind of voodoo, witchcraft, any of that kind of garbage. And so they were very clear about that in their Constitution. And in Panama, prayer is still required in schools. So every morning in public schools across Panama, they are saying a prayer. And they don't do political correctness. They're not tiptoeing around looking for something to be offended about. As a matter of fact, if you come to Panama, you'll find that people are pretty plain spoken, and they don't worry so much about offending people. So you know, if I go away for 6 months and I come back, and they'll say, "Wow, you got really fat while you were gone, and so did your wife." You know, they're very, very direct like that. And when you first go to Panama, it's a little bit horrifying maybe, but eventually you kind of realize that it's really liberating not to have to worry about that kind of thing. And I love the kind of things that I see in Panama, like around Christmas time, when everywhere you look in the public square, there are expressions of, you know, Christmas cheer that have to do with Christianity, and nobody worries about offending anybody with it. They wouldn't they wouldn't get that. They wouldn't be able to wrap their heads around that, because of course you're going to celebrate Christmas. I've had several times where I've gone to the airport early in the morning, and the new shift of TSA workers was coming on duty in Panama, and they all stand around in a big circle and hold hands and pray before they start their day. This is, you know, government officials doing things like that. I think that's fantastic. And so I love to see that President Trump is working to set things right in America and counter that anti-Christian bias that we've seen so prevalent with left-wing administrations like Barack Obama and Joe Biden. So I'd love to see that sort of thing, and more power to them. So fantastic. All right. So we just went over an hour. God bless you all. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you will subscribe to this podcast. Make sure that you're subscribed here on the YouTube channel. Go over to chuckholton.com and subscribe over there if you want to support my work. That is one way that we keep the lights on and keep traveling to go all the places you need to hear from. So I appreciate all of you who are supporting, like John Babcock here, who just donated $10 and said, "Go get a coffee and a donut on me." I'll get coffee, but I'm not doing donuts. They tend to get wedged right in the, kind of stuck right in this region right down here. So I'll pass on the donut. But thank you very much for that. It means a lot. It's very encouraging when people put their money where their mouth is and say, not only do I like what you're doing, but we actually support you and we want you to do more of it. So that's huge for me. You can do that for free by just subscribing to the channel or by subscribing over at chuckholton.com. But we do appreciate those of you who support us and who support our sponsors like TWC. So again, twc.health/hotzone, and you'll get 60% off over there. Lots of great products. So take a look at that website, and thank you to our sponsors. All right, we'll see you all next time.